Okay. Okay, Grandma and Grandpa, could you tell us what you remember about your parents? Grandma, would you like to start? Tell us what you remember about your parents.
Oh, I'd love to do that, Nancy, because I love them both with all my heart. From the time I can remember, I suppose the most important thing was that they surely loved us, and they surely loved the Lord, and the church was just the whole thing in their lives. I wrote a little thought about my mother. I wonder if I could just take a moment and read it. Don't know how we are time-wise.
We have plenty of time.
We're always writing little histories in our family. But I just mentioned in this that it was about July 26, 1960, about 2 a.m. Read the 21st. While I was the one standing vigil by our beloved mother's bedside alone, that she slipped from this life to the next. She was very prepared to go and happy. In fact, she had let me know that in her very weakened condition. She was happy about it. She was so, her faith was such that she really saw and understood. And the reunion on the other side of the veil must have been really happy, just as it was sad, in a way, here. But that was a very sacred experience for me to be the one that was there with you. And I've often thought since, this is what I've recorded, why was the life of my mother such a glorious success? Why did all who knew her love and desire to emulate her? Why is she really the motherhood ideal of all her daughters? 10, 9, although 4 was gone now. Well, to me, some of the reasons are she loved the Lord and his work with all her heart. And she loved her family, and she loved all others with all her heart. And somehow, in a magical way, in the never-fail formula, she put those two loves together. And the other reason was that she lived with a sincere, constant prayer on her lips and in her heart. Mother was always in tune with the Spirit. She really had the Holy Spirit to guide, and she followed him. And she knew the Scriptures. You can't believe how she knew those Scriptures, how often people would ask her. They just thrilled her and inspired her, and she just lived by them. The third reason was that Mother was always happy. You'd never see her down. She just wasn't. She had real tragedies, but she accepts them all in the light of her faith. They were just opportunities to prove her worthiness for blessings. They were testings. That's what we're here for. She could always see through the dark the real light, and it was always there for Mother. She interpreted all life in the light of the gospel, and constantly helped others try to do the same. Then the last reason I wrote in this little history, she was completely selfless, very reluctant to even mention any of her own needs or her own problems, as she had them very deep and severe ones. But she knew others had theirs too. Her desire was always to just help others, and she always did, greatly in the most meaningful ways. Mother always saw the good in others and spoke only of that. I have never heard Mother say anything bad of anyone. That was just the way she was. She just wouldn't say it if there was something unfortunate. We felt Mother believed in us implicitly, that if we had need to make changes, of course we would. And her deep and real confidence in us brought the only possible result. We sort of became what she expected and knew we would become. As her father wrote of her mother, I end this little tribute to her with these words that he wrote of her mother. All radiant now over yonder, she sits on the throne of her worth and smiles in the midst of her splendor with a love that reaches to earth. Father was just a great guy. I remember at his funeral, Robert, my nephew, Robert Anderson, said, Grandpa was the most popular one in the whole family. We're sure going to miss him. He was solid and good. Let me just quickly mention one thing that describes him. When I was attending BYU, Harold R. Clark who you didn't know, but one of the buildings is named after him, called me and he said, Miss Holbrook. And I stopped and he came up and he said, I want to tell you about your father and your grandfather. He said, you know, your grandfather was so honest. See, he knew them both well, long before your time. But people used to laugh at him and say, oh, he outlived Lincoln. He fought more than a mile to give a nickel back. You know, just expectation. They would smile at him. And he said, you know, Miss Holbrook, your father was exactly the same way. So honest. The people kind of laughed as kind of joked. Then he turned to me before we parted and he said, Miss Holbrook, I sure hope every one of their ancestors are so honest that people can laugh at them.
Their descendants.
Their descendants. Oh, yes.
Too.
Thank you, Grandpa. Grandpa's always helpful.
Good. Should we show the picture?
Yes.
Yeah. Right here.
Picture of my parents. I think that picture was taken on their golden wedding. They were beautiful people. They are beautiful people.
Yeah, have Grandma give their full names too.
Yeah, why don't you give the name?
Their mother's name was Alcina Elizabeth Brimhall Holbrook. She was named after her mother, Alcina Elizabeth. Father's name was Lafayette Hinckley Holbrook.
Now, was Hinckley his mother's maiden name?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, my father's mother was a Hinckley. She's an aunt of Gordon Hinckley.
To tell about your parents and what your feelings were growing up as an orphan, and also please retell the apple tree story. We want to hear the official account.
Well, all right, thank you. I really have some very vivid and important memories of my parents because Mother died when I was 2 and Father died when I was 3. And all my growing up years I was taught and told by Grandma Brunt about Mother and by Grandma and Grandpa Groberg and Aunt Mattie and Uncle Charlie and Aunt Ellen about Father. And I was just loved and taken care of by Aunt Mattie and Uncle Charlie, just as though I was their son, but they never hesitated at all, and neither did the bishop or any of the other relatives to tell me all about Father as a young man and as a school teacher and as a missionary, and how he and Mother loved each other and how they were married in the Logan Temple, and how Father was a member of the Sunday school superintendency as a young man, as superintendent in Far West, and then on this board of the Weber Stake Sunday School with David O. McKay and some of the other local Weber County people, and then he was superintendent of the Sunday school in the Bingham Stake in Idaho Falls. And I grew up just understanding that they were very, very close, that they were real, and that's where this apple tree experience comes in. When I get kind of wondering about who they were really, because I knew these others, I knew grandparents, I knew Aunt Mattie and Uncle Charlie, but all I had was pictures of Mother and Father and then these stories. But at times when I'd get a little anxious and a little concerned about just where my parents were, what they were doing, And when I had questions that I'd like to ask them, I'd go out, climb up in the tree, get up as high as I could, and I always felt like I was getting closer to them. And as I would get up there, I felt that I could visit with them. And I had a strong feeling that it was a great advantage to have them so available, and that they were watching me and watching over me, that they were interested in me. And I remember one thought that I had as I was visiting and really feeling close to my parents, was that when some of the other boys would say, let's hide or let's scatter, here comes father or here comes mother, or let's not let them see us, I used to feel, you know, my parents can see me all the time. I'm right where they know where I am, what I'm doing, and I got that feeling real securely that they were real, and I'm always been grateful to Aunt Mattie and Uncle Charlie and to grandparents for always relating me to my parents, so that I never felt like, you mentioned how did I feel about being an orphan. I really knew that my parents were not living here like so many of the others were, but I never felt like I was really an orphan. I had parents, and I just appreciate so much what the bishop and others of Father's friends would tell me about him, and about how much they loved him and how much they learned from him, and how good a teacher he was. And I felt like, you know, he's teaching me too. And of course, Mother was only 26 or barely when she died, so she was just a young lady, but everyone talked about how beautiful she was and how much in love Father and Mother were. And one even said, when I said, I wonder why Father couldn't have lived, Mother died when my sister was born, and it was kind of a rather common thing then for mothers to die at childbirth. But Father only lived a year after Mother died, and this one friend says, you know, the doctors may not believe this, but I believe that it just kind of broke his heart when Mother died.
You show the picture of them?
Now that's a picture of the time they were married, and Father had been on a mission to Sweden, and he had gone back to where grandfather and grandmother were born and where they lived, where they joined the church. That was in Sweden. And Grandma wanted to teach me Swedish, and she said that Father was very fluid in Swedish, and I learned to tara svenska lite, inte mycket, but lite. And I appreciated Grandma's interest in wanting me to speak Swedish, and I always felt like Father would have been happy if I'd taken it more seriously and learned Swedish.
So your Grandma Groberg was
Grandma Groberg and Grandpa Groberg talked Swedish all the time, and they really were right from Sweden, and they were grown when they left Sweden. And Grandfather had done missionary work in Sweden as a young priest or a young man, and Grandma always was so proud that she could tell that Grandpa had been a missionary there, and then Father had been a missionary there. And first thing she taught me was to count, and I know if I'd have taken it seriously, I could have learned other things as well as that, because I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And I can go right on with the numbers. And I think that the Swedish, the mission, the feeling of their closeness is a very definite part of my life and my memory, and I think about them now. And you know, I believe I see them like they'll be too. See, they were just in their prime of life. And that's probably the way I'll see them. They never got old. They don't have to recover any hearing or sight or any of those things.
Did you get the picture? Okay, we have one more question in this section on your parents, and Grandma, we'll start with you. What is your fondest memory of your parents? One incident or a memory?
Did we look that over? Fondest memories. Actually, they're all fond. And there were some funny things, too, that happened. We always loved each other. Father was very strict, but we liked it that way. We knew just what we could do and what we couldn't. I remember one. Well, I must have been either a senior in high school, freshman in college. I went to the BYU from the time I was 4, 2 years of kindergarten, so clear on up. I remember I had stayed after school till play practice, and a young man by the name of Bill McCord walked me home. It was only about 5 or 6, you know. And just said goodbye, and I went in. Father said, "Wasn't that Bill McCord?" I said, "Yes." And he and I had the lead in a play at BYU sometime later. I had no personal interest in him at all. But I remember Father said, "You know, he's a nice young man, but he's not a Mormon." So, you know, we don't date young men. I was just barely starting today. Oh, I knew that, you know, and I didn't even need to be reminded. He just wanted to make it very certain that I understood those particular things. I can't tell you one right offhand, one particularly fondest. They were all beautiful experiences.
We have some questions later on about your growing up days, and maybe some. Grandpa, do you have any specific memories of perhaps your father?
Well, I have one, Nancy, and it's really practically the only one that definitely while he was living. And that was in the bedroom in the Grandpa and Grandma Groberg's home out at Far West. My brother Leroy and I were there, and Grandma and Grandpa called us and said to come into the bedroom. And Roy and I would have been 3 years old, and Roy would have been 5. And they had us get up to Father's bed, and Father looked at us both and wanted to give us a kiss, and then I remember just as clear as anything, he said, "Now, be good boys." And I heard that as clear and remember it as plainly as anything.
You'd be about 3.
And then they took us out, or we went out. And the next memory that I have was sitting out on the porch, and the big funeral hearses. They had carriages, and I remember those. It would have had to have been maybe 2 or 3 days later, but that's the next memory that I had, was that he had died. And then another.
Were these horse-drawn carriages?
Yes, they were horse-drawn. And the doctor, though, probably in between, but I asked Roy and I if we'd like to go for a ride in his automobile. And that was the first automobile we had ever ridden in, to remember. But he took us from the farmhouse up the road about a couple of miles back in his car.
Boy, that would have been exciting.
Nancy, I do have one memory of my mother that I think would be good to record very briefly. If that's all right?
Oh, yeah.
I was a very little girl, maybe 8 or 9, or maybe not quite. One afternoon when my mother asked if I'd like to walk up to what we call Temple Hill. We just lived 3 or 4 blocks from there. That's where the BYU is now, but at that time the only building there was the Major Memorial. And it was, I remember very distinctly because it was twilight, getting to be, the sun was just beginning to set. And she took my little sister Mary, 2 years younger than I was. And the 3 of us walked up those few blocks and climbed that hill. We always called it Temple Hill. It was our most popular playground, winter and summer. And we went clear to the top, and she had brought a little blanket. And the 3 of us sat down. And she pointed to the Utah Lake, the sun setting beautiful. Said, you see how much Heavenly Father loves us to make this so beautiful? And she pointed to where the Y Mountain is now, and talked about that and about Heavenly Father's love. I don't remember just the sequence or anything, but at this time she told Mary, God, that there was growing within her a little new baby, and that within a few months we would have a new little baby, brother or sister. She said it in such a way that we were so excited and so thrilled because all we loved each other. We were kind of a different family. We just really did love each other. And then she just talked to us gently about it. That was my first experience of ever knowing it. It was such a beautiful. And then she explained that when we got to be big ladies, and some wonderful young man would come home from his mission, and we'd go to the temple. We heard about the temple, about missions. We'd get to have a little new baby of our very own. We just did everything Heavenly Father wanted us. That was all. But we stayed there so the sunset became just almost dusk, and then we walked home holding hands, the 3 of us. But that was an experience that I wished other children could have.
How old
Introduced to something so beautiful.
How old do you think you were then?
How old were
How
you
old?
then?
Oh, I wish I could tell you. I couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, and Mary around, maybe 9, and Mary about 7, something like that.
Okay, Grandma, that last story was a real good one to lead into the next question, or the next section, which has to do with your early childhood. And we'd like to ask you what your feelings were about growing up in a large family. Now, I know you had 11. Just kind of tell us a little bit about how it felt to have that many brothers and sisters, and if people kind of teased you about it, or if they teased you about it, or...
My mother had 2 boys and 9 girls. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? 2 boys and 9 girls. You know, I'm sure we had, problems and things, but as I look back on it, we were the happiest family you can imagine. We just were. There was a real sweet spirit in our home. We all had our work to do, and we did it. But we had a lot of fun. I'm sure we must have quarreled a little bit, but I can't remember that part very much. I would say it would be all joy. we never were allowed to waste things. When we had clothes, you know, we'd pass them on down and use them up for food or anything like that. But we never were immoral. We had beautiful homes and plenty of everything. Would you like to ask me something a little more specific?
Okay, yeah, let's, why don't you tell us what some of your chores were? What were your
Now that's
assignments?
interesting because as I look back, we lived on 3rd East and 3rd North in what we called the clinker brick home. I was born out in a little farm home on the road to Springfield. But we lived there in the clinker brick home from the time I was about 2 on. And in the back, we had a huge garden spot, and we had cows, and we had chickens. And we used to drive the cows to the pasture, and in the evening we'd drive them back. And we used to deliver milk. We milked the cows and sell it to the neighbors as the little girls would deliver the milk. And we'd gather the eggs. And of course we always had a huge garden. And we'd help with that. And in those days I think it was quite typical that Mother would can hundreds, I mean really hundreds of 2-quart bottles of everything you can imagine. I think we just kind of did that, but you know, that was just part of our living, and we were always singing songs, and it was a happy experience. I guess we were a little spoiled. Although Father was very strict about our doing our chores and the things that had to be done, but I do remember once we had 2 black walnut trees across the street. And the walnuts would fall on the ground, and we'd go over and pick them off the ground, bring them over and take rocks and sit on the sidewalk when we got sidewalks, and take these rocks and crack these nuts and eat them. And I remember once President Keeler, state president, just lived a block and a half from us, and he was walking home, and he saw 3 or 4 of us out there. I guess we were awfully dirty, sitting on the sidewalk talking, isn't it? I remember even now, he said, "Oh, with all your sweet mother has to do, just look how dirty you are." And made us think we were doing something wrong, you know. There were shells all over, and of course all they'd see that we picked them up. But I remember that. It never even occurred to me that Mother would object to what we were doing at that particular time, and she wouldn't. We cleaned up. I do remember that.
I remember as a child of cracking black walnuts, and I know how black, that's why they're named black, because you really do get a
The
lot of
husking
stains on them.
especially, it
That's right.
just stains that you couldn't hardly get off.
That's right. I ruined more than one little dress out there.
But Nancy, this may come in another question, but you know, at that time in Provo, one of the big industries was what they called the night woolen mills. They made woolen goods. Father used to sell for them sometimes. But anyway, they had a little woolen coat out of those marvelous woolen materials made for my older sister Rachel. But she was just a little girl, 2 or 3. All 9 girls wore that coat. And when it was at the end, it was just a little ragged around the cuffs, to call it, you know.
Yeah.
That's the type of thing. But we were so happy with what we were doing. We didn't think, those things we didn't think about being dressed up. Well, we always had a pair of shoes to play in and a pair for Sunday. That was, you know, just the way things were in those days.
That's great. Grandpa, would you like to tell us a little bit about what your chores were growing up?
You know, when the decision was made, and I thought of how challenging the decision was when here a little baby girl and a little boy 2 and a boy 4 were left, and there were grandparents and there were uncles and aunts, and I'm sure the decision was made on the basis of where could these children live, where they'd be taken care of the best and where they'd have something to do. And so it was decided that my little sister Maud would stay with Grandma Brunt in Idaho Falls, and Roy and I would stay with Aunt Mattie and Uncle Charlie and Grandma and Grandpa Groberg in Far West, because there was a farm there and we could be helpful on the farm. And I'm sure we weren't very helpful to start out with, but my earliest recollections was that I could feed the chickens and hunt for eggs. We had it was a large farm, and there was orchards, and there was trees, and there was haystacks, and there was fences, and there was areas where bushes. And I can remember as real small, probably during the period when I was 4 and 5, of hunting under bushes and finding nests of eggs and climbing in the haystack and finding, and once in a while, and this was kind of a interesting feeling, that if we missed the eggs, missed the nests for very long, the hen would come out with a bunch of little chickens out of there. And it seemed like instead of losing, we were winners when we missed those. But those hens were really very clever, the way they find places that we'd be looking for them every day. We'd know that the hens were laying eggs about every day, and when we didn't find them, we'd know they were hiding, and finally the secret would be out. Here the hen would come with about 10 little chickens, just as proud, and we would be too. We would realize, because we would raise the chickens, and then the little chickens we'd have more. That was one of my earliest jobs. And then Mama mentioned about taking the cows to pasture. That was another thing. Pasture was down about half a mile, and there was a lane with a fence on both sides, and we'd drive the cows down to the pasture. We had a dog named Rover, and it was a black, rather large dog, but it was so friendly. And I thought how we could have originated the idea that dog was man's and children's best friend, because this was really a friendly dog, and it would help take the cows down to pasture. And I wasn't very old. It may have been 7 or 8 when one day that dog came back from a little excursion it had taken down in the field, and it had encountered a porcupine. And it just had porcupine quills all over it. And I remember Uncle Charlie was so thoughtful of us. He says, you know, that we called the dog Guess. And that was kind of interesting. People would see us playing with the dog, and what's the dog's name? Guess. Well, I can't guess what is its name. But anyway, Uncle Charlie made us feel pretty good that this dog was a real hero, that he felt like the porcupine was going to get to the chickens, or was going to do some harm, and that he had just decided to take it by the tail and really have it understand who was in charge. But the porcupine quills got in the dog, and I don't remember just how they ended it, but after that we didn't have old Gas. And we had to take the cows down to pasture and bring them back without the dog. And then I remember, I guess I was about 9, I wanted to start milking cows. Roy was milking. And I was told that I confused the cows, that they thought I was a little dog. I was running around. They said I had to be bigger than that. But when I really got a chance to milk cows, I kind of wondered whether that was a smart idea or not. Because after I got started, I milked cows, and that was one of my jobs, was milking the cows day and night. I did till I was through high school. I milked cows, so those were some of the jobs that I did. But on the farm, we had general farm work. In the hay, and in the beets, and in the potatoes, and irrigating, and hoeing, and hauling hay, and piling hay, and feeding the stock. We just really, I think we were quite handy there and quite helpful. And I think Uncle Charlie and Aunt Mattie felt like we were real helpful after we got to be about 10 or 12. From then on, we were farm hands.
Good. You touched on a question that Heather Hubble wants to know about, and that was if you have any pets, and which was your favorite? You didn't have any.
Well, as far as I remember, this dog Guess was the favorite one, although we had cats, and we had horses, and we had cows that were real gentle, and we were fond of the livestock. But this one dog was real special.
Okay, Grandma, how would you like to take a minute and tell us about Aunt Jennie Knight? You know that she played a big part in your life.
She was a very important part of my growing up. She was Mother's sister, the only sister by that mother. And, of course, I was named, I remember once I was visiting Aunt Jennie, and she had a friend there, and she said to me, "Tell this lady what your name is." And I said, "Jennie." "And why is it Jennie?" And I said, "I was named Jennie instead of you." instead of after. And I remember how they laughed, and Aunt Jennie explained to me that was the wrong word. Instead of. But she was really like a second mother to all of us, but especially to me. And I was just there so much at the time, and I could tell some real funny experiences with Aunt Jennie. She was a really great person. Just 2 or 3 evenings ago, we were over visiting some friends, quite a bit older than we are. Marty Gents, and we were Armstrong, your parents probably remember them. But she asked about my Aunt Jennie, and I told her a few things about her, some funny experiences I'd had with her when I was a little older. And she said, "You know, she was one woman that all of the lady students just loved. She was sort of their ideal. She was never privileged to have any children, but she adopted these 2 little boys and raised them to maturity. Well, they were adopted. One was sealed to them, but the other one was born under the covenant. He didn't know that he wasn't sealed to them until he went to the temple to get married. But they were very close. But Aunt Jennie also had 1 or 2 other children that they hoped to have sealed. One little girl named Josephine they kept about 2 years. And it really broke their heart when some of the family took her back. They wanted her. But, I could go on and on about Aunt Jennie, but maybe that's enough.
Do you want to tell us one of the funny experiences?
Okay. Uncle Will, that's Aunt Jennie's husband, was a member of the state presidency. And I remember that they had a lovely home. So that in those days, when we'd have state conference in the same tabernacle, the South State Tabernacle, when the brethren would come from Salt Lake, they'd have to stay overnight. Both nights. They'd have Friday, Saturday, 2 days. 2 days.
Yeah, I think
2 or 3.
they probably come up for Friday night and Saturday night and Sunday night.
But anyway, on this, Jennie used to always, when I was big enough to help set the table or something, I'd always go. But they had one room that was just for guests. And it had a bronze bedstead and everything, just quite elegant for the time. And I can remember that President Grant came this particular time. But anyway, our Aunt Jennie decided she'd get a new dress for this conference. And she took me with her and bought this beautiful new dress. Now she didn't like to have hard help, but she used to have me come and just kind of help. She really did most of it. But I remember she was all dressed up in this dress. And I guess it was in between the sessions, and she hurried home to fix the meal and the last touches. And I'd been there helping her, and just as the guests were coming in, President Grant and several others, she was working over this stove. I don't remember whether she dropped something or something boiled over, but something splashed all over her dress. And there she was, and she couldn't do a thing, I remember. And then she told me what to do quick, and she slipped up the back, went upstairs, and put on one of her old dresses, of course. And I remember that, how she was just flabbergasted. Well, she just got ready, and we fixed the meal and served it, and I used to serve it. She used to see that I always, when I dust, that I did it right. I got some real good training from her, even if I didn't carry it on. But another funny experience, she needed a new coat, and she went to DCMI in Salt Lake to buy it, and they discovered that she was Mrs. Knight, and she was also a counselor at the time in the General Relief Society presidency, first counselor. But she didn't think the clerks would know her, And we were in DCMI, and they were having a big sale on the coats, must have been January. I remember she was in there trying on all these real coats. And one of the clerks recognized her and got some very special help and came in and explained, that to come with them. And they took her, and there were fur coats and things. I don't remember the details, except she didn't buy a coat, and she was a little upset. They were trying to put pressure on her, to get a really expensive coat. But I remember that when we got out of the store, she just was so gracious and nice to them, she got out of it. But it was rather annoying to her, because she never did go for things that money could buy. She wasn't that interested. But in her position, she was expected to look nice, But I knew her so well, I think little things like that,
Now, did she live near to your house?
Yes, she did. She lived 3 blocks out. And she really was just like a second mother. She was always there. She and Grandpa Brimhall were there just always so much. And beautiful experience. I'd never go to town without walking through Aunt Jennie's. I probably have told this to you. You've heard it before. I'll just mention it. It's pretty cute, and it's typical. One afternoon, well, it was Sunday, and we had come from Sunday school. Of course, we just had Sunday school in the morning. Father realized he didn't have his Sunday paper, and we weren't supposed to shop on Sunday, but he had to have that paper. So he told me to run to uptown and get him a Tribune, I think it was. He said it'll cost a dime. And the only change he had was a $10 bill. And he said, I think I can trust you. Be sure and wrap it up carefully in your handkerchief. So I went, Mother wouldn't agree to doing this at all. I'm sorry. Mother and Father often didn't agree fully on things. But I remember I skipped along up to Aunt Jennie's and walked in as I always do. Walked through. She had a place where we'd have cookies, you know. No one was home because they were at church or being in the state presence, you know. And so I just went on uptown and bought the Tribune. And I took the $5 bill in change and held it tight in this hand. And then I took my hanky that I was supposed to wrap the change in and very carefully wrapped up $4.90 and tied it in my hanky. And took the Tribune. And when I walked back, I walked through Aunt Jennie's, fellows left the door open. She still wasn't home. I was a little bit weary, so I sat down in her big, they had 2 black leather chairs, and I just sat down, rested a few minutes, hoped they'd come, but they didn't. So I hurried on home, and Father had made the journey in such a quick time that he was still outside arguing, really arguing with one of the neighbors about something he could have said in Sunday school class.
About the gospel doctrine class.
They used to really argue. And I said, we used to call him Papa. Papa, here's your paper. And he just took it. He was so involved in this argument. And then when I went to give him the change, all of a sudden I realized I didn't have the $5 bill in my hand. Well, you know, in those days, $5 was a huge amount of money. I remember I thought, oh, I've lost that $5 bill. And he was still involved. I hurried in the house. This is the way our mother had trained us. And I remember in Mother's bedroom there was an extra big closet. And I went into that closet and closed the door, and I knelt down and I prayed. I was desperate. I said, Heavenly Father, I've got to find that bill. I've got to find it fast. And then I said, thank you, Heavenly Father, for helping me. And I got up and I walked out, just positive, you know, I'd find it. And I hurried as fast as I could, but looked all over the sidewalk up at Jennie's. And I walked through the house again, and I sat down in that black chair. No one was home yet. And I looked down, and there was the $5 bill on the floor. You've heard me tell this. And so I hurried back and gave him the full change. But then I went back into that closet. This is the way Mother taught us, you know. And I knelt down and I said, oh, Heavenly Father, thank you so much. I knew you would. But I was in such a hurry, but I thought that was sweet. That sort of shows the relation we have with Aunt Jennie.
That's good.
I remember Aunt Jennie when I first met Grandma. She was just exactly like a second mother. She wanted to get acquainted, and I remember how she knew all the Relief Society people up in Idaho Falls, and she was so interested in Sister Laird, who was the president up there, and I said, well, now, my Aunt Clara Brunt is the president now, and she says, oh, that's right, they've changed. She's the new president, she knew, and so we got acquainted, and I was really so fond of Aunt Jennie, and I think she was, along with Grandma Holbrook, she was one of my best supporters. And she was very interested in her namesake here being treated all right, and it was a real advantage to me to have a close friendship with Aunt Jennie.
I think, Nancy, and as much as this is for history, let me just mention that when Aunt Jennie was really dying, she was very old, I came from Idaho Falls to be with her, and they had taken her to the hospital thinking that she maybe wouldn't make it through the night. But they couldn't find anyone to stay with her, and so I stayed with her all that night. And she'd kind of come out of her serotonin, you know, and she'd kind of, oh, please, Father, take me, very faintly. But then once in a while she'd kind of open her eyes and she'd say, oh, darling, are you still here? I was there all night. But I remember the doctor came in the morning. And he came in and she was breathing a little easier. And he gave her something, some kind of shot, you know. And I remember that in just a few minutes, she kind of revived. And I leaned over, I could hear a lot better then than I can now. But I'll never forget. She said, "Oh, Jennie, have they brought me back to go all through that again?" And you know, she didn't die just 2 days later. And I've often thought of that, wondered
What she...
if it's good to do that, to interfere with nature that way. Anyway, that was a sweet experience.
But she was sure swell and a real part of the family. She would come over to Holbrook's, and when we had I think one of the first dates that I had with Grandma was with the 3rd of March of the next year anyway, and Aunt Jennie came to the birthday party.
Great. Okay, Jeremy Hubble wants to know what games you played as a child. Some specific, card games or board games and outside games. What were some of your favorite games?
Inside it was checkers, and we had a crokinole board that we kind of played with that had little things like checkers. And outside, one of the first things that I remember was a bicycle. And we sure had fun riding the bicycle. And then we had real boys and girls games that when they grouped together, we had Run Sheepy Run and Kick the Can. I remember the Run Sheepy Run, we'd run and hide, and the Kick the Can, we'd kind of like football. We'd kick it one way, one group, and the other way, the other group.
Did you get to ride horses much?
Yes, we had all of the horses were available to ride, although they were work horses, not just riding horses, but we would take horses as I got older, in the 12, 14, 16 years old, and really go for quite long rides on horses. And, but the horses, generally, we used to hitch them up to the buggy and the wagons. We had two different kinds of wagons. We had one with a shaft, we called it, and one horse with the shaft on each side, and the one horse, and then we had them with the double tree and two horses. And we used to keep track of the time when we'd go to Ogden. It was only 7 miles, and it took just about an hour to go in the horse as fast as the horses could go to town.
How about you, Grandma? Did you play games in your family?
It's interesting how games like roller skating, hopscotch, hide and go seek, they still play them today, don't they? Games like that. Now, you mentioned something about card games. Everything that the church said, that's what we meant by the church was getting real card games. But I remember one when Raymond was old enough to must have been in high school or something, he had a bunch of friends over. So they went down and bought a set of playing cards, you know, and they were going to play cards. And they had all these friends in there, and they had these cards. And Mother just walked through, didn't say anything. Hi, Joe. But I remember 5 minutes later, Father walked in, and he said, let's see what you're playing. They were cards, you know, and they showed him, and he said, do you have some? And so they all handed him the cards, and he just took them and walked over to the fireplace where a fire was burning and just put them in and walked out. That was it.
Joe, we're on set here. Come right in and listen.
That's what they came over to do.
Grandma, did you have some favorite outside games that you played, maybe with neighborhood friends or your sisters?
Well, I couldn't go see. We used to play what we call anti-eye over or something, and we throw a ball over the house.
Anti-IO.
Racing. We didn't, you know, play baseball and games like that. We didn't have things like coconuts.
Did you play with dolls a lot?
Oh, every Christmas, we'd all that were under 9 would get a doll. Every Christmas. That was the main joy, those dolls.
Did you play? Oh, I was wondering about jacks.
Oh, yes, but we didn't have jacks. We'd have little rocks,
Uh-huh.
little pebbles. What would we use for balls?
Well, in Tommy, they just throw one of the rocks up.
Probably did. We used rocks. We didn't have balls and jacks, but we played jacks with pebbles.
I'd like to know what you did in the winter time for activities and games.
We had snow, and we had ice skates, and we had sleds, and we used to, Grandpa Brimhall used to come up with a cutter, take us in his sled cutter, and we used to get behind, would it be behind the car? When I remember when the first car came to Provo, but we'd go sleigh riding with a horse or a buggy or something, you know. And we had a lot of fun, just snowballing each other in the winter. We loved the snow.
He had the bells on the horse, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He had bells that were given him some way. They belonged to Brigham Young originally. So Grandpa had them on his cutter.
Whatever happened to those bells?
I think Smoot Brimhall has those bells.
I think so. I think he said he had them. He would give them to the BYU. Well, he said he'd given them to the children, but he would mention to them if they have a collection where they wanted some of Grandpa
They really are
Brimhall's.
not, you know, probably should go to Brigham Young. Anyway, we just mentioned that.
But you know, for Jeremy, we used to have ice skating, and actually we could ice skate on the road, and we would actually skate a half a mile. It was a half a mile from our house to church, and we'd take our skates and skate up the road to church. And then we used to have all kinds of ball games, catch, and we had one old cat and two old cats in baseball, and then we had the regular baseball, and I played baseball on a ward baseball team, and we were really very interested in baseball, and leagues, and played in a league that took in all the little towns around Weber County. One time we won the championship.
Was that the hardball or softball?
Hardball.
What position did you play?
You know, I played third base in this championship game. I was the third baseman, and the pitcher got his arm thrown out, And so they asked me to pitch the last innings, and I remember how excited I was because we had the game won if they didn't make any runs in the last innings. And I really threw, and I think I only threw 3 or 4 balls, and each one they hit and knocked it out. And one of the fielders caught each one got out. That was real support, but I remember how serious I thought it was to be the pitcher.
Did either of you do any skiing?
Skiing? Did they used to ski?
You know, we had barrel slats.
Yeah.
Barrel slats.
It wasn't
And we
such a
would-
big sport.
We would put them on with BAMs and do kind of cross-country type skiing out in the snow, and where there were hills, why we would slide with those barrel slats. But we didn't have any. I never did have a pair of regular skis as a youngster.
Talking about skiing, Grandma, did I remember wrong that when George was a teenager that you took skiing lessons with George one year?
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Well, I
always
used to
thought.
take the younger ones up to Kelly's,
Uh-huh.
Nice canyon.
and when they were all safely taken care of, I was determined they couldn't see me learn how. I tried, so I took several lessons in skiing. I
thought
never
that
did
was
become good
wonderful
enough
that
to
you-
let my children watch me.
Mama would really take the children around. She took them to Sun Valley. And she was a real prominent ski
Not skiers.
advocate for the children.
That's their mother of the skiers.
That's great. We'll have one more question and then we'll take a break. Did you ever get in trouble?
Well,
This is Jeffrey Hubbard.
Yeah,
asking that.
Jeff Hubbard once.
He wants to know if you ever cried.
If you ever cried.
can you give me a little help on that? I'm sure I got in trouble. I can't quite think. Well, for
Do you remember a time when your father might have scolded you or spanked you? You mentioned that he was quite strict.
He was strict, but we never were hit or struck. Never any of us. But this did happen. It was sure trouble at the time. We all went to Salt Lake to see the big parade on the 24th of July. I was only 4, but I remember it vividly because the streets were just solid with people. And Mother was holding so close my hand. And we were walking along there, and for some reason I dropped something or something. Anyway, I let go of Mother's hand and picked this up and then went and took hold of her hand again. And she very rudely pulled her hand away. And I looked up and it wasn't my mama. And there I was. And I was lost in that huge crowd. And I was lost for quite a while. And I remember I tried so hard to not cry, because that was kind of like a boob, but I was really scared. Mother was not there. And everyone was kind of pushing me around, and I was so little I couldn't see all these big people. It must have gone on for, maybe half hour, 45 minutes. But I can sure remember it. And I tried so hard to, it was awfully important to me not to let people see me cry. And all of a sudden, I saw a lady, and she looked familiar. It was actually Father's sister who had come to, she lives in California, but she'd come to spend the holidays, the 24th. And she looked at me, and she walked past, and I thought she looked at me, and then she turned around and said, "Are you Faye Holbrook's daughter?" And I was crying so hard by then I couldn't answer, and she said, "Oh, I know you are." And she took me, and she found Mother. Mother was just sick. Everyone, the police and all, were looking for me. And, of course, Mother was praying and knew I'd be found, because Mother was that way. she had so much faith. When she prayed for the right thing that was all okay. But I remember that so well. That was a horrible feeling. I guess it was harder on my mother, but that's how I was found.
Grandpa, were you ever in trouble? Did you get scolding?
You know, I really did some things that I ought to got in trouble for.
It's probably safe to mention them now.
One time when I was milking the cows, it was really kind of rainy and wet, and the cow's tail was really a problem to me, and I took a piece of wire and wired the tail and went to milk the cow, and the cow was ornery, and it moved around and pulled the end of its tail off.
I didn't want him to tell that.
And I was sure in trouble.
With the cow or with your Uncle Charlie?
From then on, we had a bobtail cow. But we were really, Jeremy, we really tried hard to not get into trouble, and I really always felt like I was being told, not only by Uncle Charlie and Aunt Mattie and Grandma and Grandpa, but by Mother and Father, to just be good, obedient, and thoughtful, and that whenever I'd get the temptation to do something that was wrong, I'd always have that feeling and that support and strength to know that it's a lot better to do the things that were right than to get into mischief. And out on the farm there was lots of opportunities for getting in with gangs, and I felt protected and directed, and every influence that I had in the home, as well as remembering my father and mother, who I knew would be directing me right, gave me strength to not get into real serious mischief.